Hi, I'm Chaplain John with Interim Hospice, and this is Chaplain Becky sitting next to me. It is a privilege to come and meet with you today. Our topic is going to be grief, and we know that that's a very difficult subject, hard to deal with it sometimes. We all go through with it, but we want to try and sit down because we know some of you cannot go to a grief share or group program somewhere, and so Chaplain Becky and I just want to help you walk through some of the grief process and what we can do to help you make that process a little bit easier. It's a blessing to be able to provide this service for you, and so we just want to go ahead and see what we can do to help you all out. Grief does touch each and every one of us several times through our lives, whether it's a spouse or a child, whether it's a brother or a sister. We all go through that, and can be so very painful. But there are ways that we can deal with grief. As I always tell my kids, I don't want, if I pass away, I don't want their grief to control their life, but to still be in charge of everything they do. I know they're going to cry, it's going to happen, but we can be in charge of our grief and not allow it to take control of us. So we want to help you deal with your loss. So Becky, what is grief?
Well, as you know, John, it's complicated.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of factors that go into grief. Grief itself is a natural and a normal reaction to loss. But it's interesting, as I thought about this as we prepared for today, grief also is a word that describes many words and many things that happen to you as a result of grief. Grief can be described as sadness, as distress, heartbreak, sorrow, and it all is related to the loss of a loved one. No matter if you've experienced the loss of an infant or a child or a parent, even a pet, not to equate the loss of a pet necessarily with the person, obviously,
No.
but pets are very much part of our family as well. So we grieve over those type of losses. And grief also can encompass many, many emotions that we carry: sadness, anger, loneliness, turmoil, and pain. But like John said, grief is a part of life, and we're all going to experience it. You think of the Lion King talking about the circle of life. Life is a circle, and we're both chaplains, and we deal with that all the time. But we cannot escape death. It's going to happen to us, and it happens to our loved ones. Sometimes out of order of what we would expect, but we're going to always have to learn how to deal with grief, and we can do that. And that's why we're starting the first series here on talking about grief. The other thing is to remember that everyone grieves differently. That's affected by many factors, but no matter how ready you think you are for a loss, even in hospice, it's still difficult. So we're going to give you some tools in the coming programs to learn how to deal with that. Some of the factors that can affect how you grieve are your gender, male or female. Still in our society a little bit, men are expected to be tougher, and women are, people tend to think that women cry a little bit more and things like that. But there are some gender issues, but at the same time, grief still affects us to our core. No matter how you handle it, there are certain factors that affect that. The other thing is your age and your life experience. If you're 15 and you lose a parent, it's different than when you're 40 and you lose your grandparents. There's different losses and things like that. Also, your faith practices and your culture will affect how you grieve. Some faiths and cultures have special rituals for death and grief. And then the other thing is your personality. Your personality is going to affect a lot about how you grieve. So we'll discuss some of those things in future weeks as well. But John, if you want to hit on, I love what you told me that you talked about when you do a funeral about grief and what you say about that.
Well, here's what I always told families at the end of a funeral service when it's just a family sitting there, is the only way to avoid grief is to never love at all. And I don't think we'd want to go through life without being loved and loving others. That's really what kind of we're called to do. And so grief is just, I've heard it described as grief is love with no place to go. And it does affect all of us. I just lost a brother about 6 weeks ago. And I know that his wife, he's got 2 kids, his wife and his daughter and his son, they're all grieving differently because they all had a different relationship
Right.
with my brother. And so we don't want to think that we are doing it differently. There really is no normal to grieving. And don't let anybody tell you that you should be over it, that you aren't grieving like they grieved, because we all do grieve differently. And so the only way, like I said, to avoid grief is to never love anybody, and I'm not even sure that's possible. One of the things that we want to share very briefly today is some of the signs that we can look at when we need further help. There are groups out there like Grief Share and some other groups that are very good programs that you could attend. You would have to look up those on the internet or under grief. But you need help when you want to make sure that you are grieving normally. Now, I said there is no normal, but sometimes we can really go crazy with things, and sometimes we just need somebody to talk to, because I know when we're grieving, we've lost a loved one. Unfortunately, so many people around us don't know how to deal with it, because we're never taught that, are we, Becky?
No, we're not.
And so they don't know what to say. And so instead of saying the wrong thing, they avoid us, or sometimes they can say some very, maybe even hurtful things, not intending to say that, not really thinking through what they're saying. But if you just need reassurance that you're doing okay, then you can seek help. If your grief is causing problems at work or with other relationships in your family, it might be, and it's okay to get family counseling if you've lost a spouse and have children. It's okay. Matter of fact, I kind of recommend family counseling. Yes. Also, if you have signs of depression for more than 2 months, you probably need to at least talk to your doctor about it, if not a grief counselor. And so if you're having physical symptoms, because our emotions can affect us greatly in our physical being. And so if you're having physical effects from this grief, you certainly, please, we encourage you to see your doctor. And there's many more that we could go into, but I think that it's so important to, if nothing else, to talk to others that are willing to listen to you and hear you out, because sometimes grief, we just need to talk to somebody and have somebody to listen. And so we are here to help you. And so I'm gonna let Becky kind of close us out today and share some things that she's got. But we are here to help, especially our interim patients and the families of our interim patients, because interim is a family, and we want for you to feel that you are part of us and we're part of you. I know as a senior chaplain here, I've gotten to know many of you, and that is such a blessing into my life. So, Chaplain Becky, why don't you kind of close us out here with some of the things we were talking about earlier?
Okay, that sounds great, John. I'm glad you referred to yourself as the senior chaplain. So I'd like to just hit on 2 points that you talked about, as far as talking about the grief. It's really important, if you can, whether it's a friend, a neighbor, a church person, someone you work with, it's really important to talk about grief, especially in the early stages. Sometimes you want to tell that story, and you may need to tell it more than once, whatever your journey to that loss was. It's very helpful to just talk that out and just share that with other people. So find a safe person. Second thing I love that you hit on was talking to your doctor. That's really important. Especially in hospice, when we have people sometimes that may go through a long process, I think it's really good when someone loses someone. I always encourage them to go to let their doctor know that they've experienced a loss, because then they have someone else on their side looking out for them as well. Because you might have an appetite loss, you might not feel well, you might not sleep well, you have some of those symptoms. So as we close out today, we just want you to know that our interim family is a family.
Let me touch on one thing that you just mentioned.
Sure.
If sometimes when you've lost a loved one that you've gone through a long illness with, it's quite normal to feel relief.
Right, absolutely.
You're
That's a
glad
good
that your
point.
loved one is not suffering anymore, but then sometimes we can feel guilty that we feel relieved.
Right.
That's a normal response because your loved one is not suffering anymore, and so it's okay to feel relieved. But continue to make sure that you're getting the help you need to deal with your grief.
Right, and I'm glad you brought that up, because that really is very important.
Right.
And to know that is a totally normal feeling, and also you get some relief even just from not having a lot of the stressors that you might have, but it's okay. So as we close out today, we're just gonna remind you that for our interim family, we're here to provide support. You can call us at the office at 848-3555 and ask for John or myself. John is the senior chaplain, as he says, and I'm gonna tease him about that. But I'm also a chaplain, but my main job here is as bereavement coordinator. So either of us, we work wonderfully well together, and we're a team, and we will work to provide the service that you need. If you have a hospice need, a home health need, or a private duty need, we're also able to help you with that. And we want to encourage you to tune into our Facebook page and see when our next support group will be. It'll be sometime around this time next month, but we're not going to give you the date yet so that you'll have to tune in. But it'll be on the same channel, of course. Some of you who remember Batman know that, same place, same time, same channel. And please send in your questions, because I promise you that next time we will answer the questions that we get. So thank you for tuning in today. Thank you, Chaplain John.
Thank you, Becky.
And
Thank you.
so thank you for being with us.
Yeah.